In light of my recent video on the topic of abortion and the violinist argument, I thought it might be interesting, and also considering this whole issue of consent to sex, consent to pregnancy, I thought it might be interesting to do a sort of direct reading from Francis Beckwith's book, Defending Life, A Moral and Legal Case Against Abortion Choice. I'm going to be reading the section on consent to sex, consent to pregnancy. It's pages 179 to 181. Quote, "Is consent to sex consent to pregnancy? Thompson and her allies make a distinction between consent to pregnancy and consent to sex. That is, consent to sex is a distinct act from consent to pregnancy. When one engages in an act of sexual intercourse without the intent to procreate a child, there is no tacit or explicit consent to caring for, or at least not to kill, the unborn child. To make their case, proponents offer a number of analogies. McDonough, for example, makes the point that we do not consent to an injury, even if we know that our actions negligibly increase our risk of injury and others may benefit from our negligence. She argues that consenting to smoking cigarettes, living in an area known for hurricanes, or wandering into a forest occupied by grizzly bears does not mean that one is consenting to lung cancer, destruction of one's property, or becoming a meal. David Boonen, provides his own illustrations. He asks to imagine a case in which a man named Ted accidentally leaves his money on the table of a restaurant to which he and his friend Bill had just dined. Although Ted is at fault for this mistake, still it is surely unreasonable, writes Boonen, to insist that by putting the money on the table when he sat down, Ted tacitly agreed to let the waiter keep all of it. As a foreseeable consequence of this act, the money was still on the table when he left. Just as consenting to smoking cigarettes is not consenting to lung cancer, and consenting to wandering into a forest is not consenting to being a grizzly bear's meal, analogously, consenting to sex does not mean that one is consenting to pregnancy. It seems to me that these analogies work only because they presuppose a controversial philosophical anthropology that many reasonable people would find prima facie mistaken. That is, if one can show that this philosophical anthropology is at least not prima facie correct, the moral intuitions that are grounded in it, and to which abortion choice proponents appeal to make their case, are not prima facie correct either. Let me explain. Although Thompson, McDonough, and Boonen separate sex and pregnancy in their analysis, it is not clear to everyone that they are detachable, though causally related events, like wandering into a forest and being attacked by a grizzly bear, acquiring lung cancer as a result of smoking cigarettes, accidentally leaving your money at the restaurant and the waiter taking it as his tip, or being hooked up involuntarily to an unconscious violinist. For it seems reasonable to many people that sex is really part of pregnancy. It is the act engaged in by agents from which pregnancy is the designed, though maybe not the desired, result. But not in the same way as lung cancer results from cigarette smoking. For if one thinks of the human organism as a unified substance with certain natural purposes, basic capacities, powers, and properties, as I argue in Chapter 6, then it seems correct to say that the telos, or purpose, of reproductive organs is reproduction, i.e. pregnancy, for sperm and ova seem intrinsically ordered towards that very purpose. On the other hand, a cigarette is an artificial construct whose purpose is externally imposed upon by an outside agent, its manufacturer. A cigarette is not a living organism, a unified substance whose parts work together for a certain purpose because of its internal nature or essence. J.P. Moreland clarifies this notion when he writes that it is because an entity has an essence and falls within a natural kind that it can possess a unity of dispositions, capacities, parts, and properties at a given time and can maintain identity through change. Moreover, it is the natural kind that determines what kinds of activities are appropriate and natural for that entity. Thus, to understand one's self and one's nature is to understand that one's sexual organs are ordered toward procreation. And once one understands and appreciates that, it seems that consent to sexual intercourse does entail consent to pregnancy, whether or not one intends or desires such a state. It is not that pregnancy is merely foreseeable, as Boonen writes. Rather, pregnancy is the intelligible point of the participants' parts acting in concert. The sperm are expelled from the male into the female so that one of them may commingle with an ovum, resulting in a new human life. Sex, of course, has other purposes, to facilitate intimacy, to unify spouses, and so on. But clearly there is nothing outrageous in claiming that pregnancy is part of sex. It is what sometimes results when all the participants' parts are functioning properly, for that is to what these parts are naturally ordered. Given this philosophical anthropology, and given Thompson, McDonough, and Boonen's concession that the fetus is a human person, though implicitly denying the broader teleological considerations that go with the pro-life understanding, one may look at their case in another, less morally compelling way. They maintain that it is permissible to engage in a pleasurable act whose design it is to bring into existence vulnerable, defenseless, and dependent human persons. And if such a person comes into existence, one of the persons responsible for its existence and who is in a unique position to care and nurture it can then destroy it without any justification except an act of will. To put it another way, the mother, in virtue of the sexual act's reproductive purpose, consents to a process in which she plays a vital, procreative, protective, and life-supportive role in relation to her unborn child, one only she can fulfill, and one which many people think she is prima facie designed to fulfill as the maternal partner of the conjugal act. She has agreed to this course of action knowing that doing so may put her child, a rights-bearing individual, in a state out of which the child cannot opt and in which the government permits its mother to kill it without any public justification. Of course, Thompson, McDonough, and Boonen may want to reject the philosophical anthropology I am suggesting and maintain that a human being is merely a collection of parts, a property thing like a car, a computer, or a cigarette, with no nature, essence, or natural purposes, and that there are literally no such things as reproductive organs as such. But it is not clear how they can do so given their reliance on notions such as rights, which they seem to believe are essential moral properties that human beings, especially pregnant women, have prior to government, that is, by nature. Yet this seems to imply that when human beings are denied their rights by government, they are not being treated in a way that is in accordance with their natural purpose, i.e. human beings are such that they have rights that ought to be respected by the state. They may respond by saying that human beings do not have a natural purpose, They may respond by saying that human beings do have a natural purpose, but only when it comes to rights, and not when it comes to sex and pregnancy. They may say that, but it is unclear how they can have it both ways philosophically once they grant teleology as an appropriate category by which to reflect on the nature of human persons. For it seems that once teleology is allowed in, it is difficult to deny that sex is part of pregnancy seems prima facie correct, that sex is ordered toward reproduction. And even if one were to delay the metaphysical foundation that some believe grounds sex as part of pregnancy, one would have to admit that the belief that sex is a part of pregnancy is at least as well grounded a moral intuition as one may extract from Thompson's violinist illustration, McDonough's analogies of lung cancer, a hurricane, and a hungry grizzly bear, and Boonen's story of Ted forgetting his money at the restaurant. End quote. Well, I hope you all enjoyed listening to this here. So yeah, take care, everybody.